On Sunday in Los Angeles and across the country, and I dare say across the world, eyes were tuned in. Millions of eyes were tuned in as Karen Bass was sworn in as the 43rd mayor of Los Angeles. She is the first woman in our 241-year history. Okay, some say, why did it take so long? Okay, I'm saying I don't care why it took so long. I'm just happy that it happened. So she's the first female, and she's only the second African-American to serve in that position. And on hand to swear her in was none other than our own Vice President Kamala Harris, a Los Angeles resident who herself made history when she became the first female African-American to serve as our vice president. It was a glorious day, and I was on hand. I was there sitting with the family. I don't know how I got there, but I was in the second row with the family with my good friend Kim Whitley. We had been on the bus with Karen Bass, Alfre Woodard, Kim Whitley, Bridget Coulter. We all had been out really stumping for Karen. So it was a magical moment for all of us to come together and see her cross the finish line, see her get sworn in, and to congratulate her. Okay, but with all the pomp and circumstance, Karen gave a speech that reminded us, Mayor Bass, I should say, reminded us that she and the city faces a tremendous challenge. And it is the 40,000 residents every night, or the 40,000 residents who sleep on the streets of Los Angeles every night. And despite celebrating her historic victory, Mayor Bass wanted everyone that was gathered at that inauguration, everyone that was watching around the world, to know that her first priority was not celebrating. It was not, basking in the glow of being the first female mayor of Los Angeles, but it was assembling a team of people that would help her lead the charge of addressing Los Angeles's homeless crisis. And she said throughout her campaign, on day one, she was going to declare a state of emergency so that she could cut through the red tape, cut through the bureaucracy, and do what's necessary to remove those people who don't have the luxury of sleeping in a bed, sleeping under a roof, to get them off the streets, to save their lives, to get them mental health services, to get them drug addiction services, to get them employment, and to give them the quality of life that they deserve, that we all deserve. And on Monday, her first day on the job, she did just that. She declared that state of emergency. So today, I'm talking to a housing expert, as well as our political strategist, about what does it mean now that she has declared this state of emergency, and how does she really implement a plan to address the crisis that has overtaken Los Angeles. We'll be talking to our experts, all coming up next.
Live from Los Angeles, this is the Special Report with Areva Martin.
My first guest this morning is Donald Whitehead Jr. He is the Executive Director for the National Coalition for the Homeless. Okay. My first guest this morning is Donald Whitehead Jr. He is the Executive Director for the National Coalition for the Homeless. He was formerly homeless himself. He has over 20 years of experience in serving and advancing housing policies. He is a returning guest to the Special Report. Good morning, Donald, and thank you for joining me.
And good morning to you, Mrs. Martin. Thank you so much for having us back again.
Oh, it's Areva. That's it. It's Areva. Donald, I thought of you instantly as I witnessed Karen Bass being sworn in as the 43rd mayor of Los Angeles, and as she gave her inauguration speech. It was primarily focused on what her plan was for addressing what is both a national crisis and a local crisis. And that is the number of individuals who live on the streets in our country and who are, some people call them unhoused, some people call them homeless, but these are individuals who don't go to bed every night in a warm bed under a roof. Many in Los Angeles sleep in tents that line our city streets. So I wanted to talk with you because Mayor Bass has a very ambitious plan. She declared on Monday of this week a state of emergency, basically, that gives her powers to cut through a lot of the bureaucracy and the red tape that many believe make creating viable and effective housing policies problematic and untimely. So, Donald, I know you've had a chance to look at Mayor Bass's plan. So let's just jump right into it. What are your initial thoughts when you look at her plan? Particularly, I'm going to sparse this plan out. The first part of it is to house 17,000 individuals in her first year as mayor.
Well, we are very happy with the announcement. First of all, homelessness should be declared an emergency in every city across the United States. It is an emergency. People are sleeping on sidewalks and in tents without locked doors and safety. So it's imperative that every city take this as seriously as Mayor Bass is taking it. I'm really optimistic about the plan. I think it really is the kind of comprehensive plan that we think can have a real impact on homelessness. People often put together plans based on the symptoms of homelessness or some of the things that homeless people are engaged in, but not looking at it in a comprehensive manner like this plan suggests.
So I serve every year Thanksgiving down at one of our missions on Skid Row. Been doing it now close to 10 years. During COVID, those fees were suspended, but I went this year. So just 3 weeks ago, the day before Thanksgiving. And I have to tell you, Donald, I was just shocked. I wasn't shocked at the number of people because it's typically 1,500, 2,500 people that we feed during this period. But what I was shocked by was how these people who are living on the streets looked like zombies. And I spent some time talking to a police officer that works that district, and he said the drug use, the use of fentanyl, the use of heroin is so pervasive. And I could see it. I mean, these people were just walking around, eyes just, in a gaze. And it was worse than I've ever seen it. So talk to me about the relationship between drug addiction and the unhoused.
Certainly, there is a level of substance abuse within the homeless population and mental health issues, and those two are inextricably linked. Many of the people are using because of the conditions that their lives have become as a result of the downward cycle towards homelessness. So they're self-medicated because we have an inadequate mental health system, and because people are housed in places like the Los Angeles County Jail, which has more people with mental health issues than any other place in the country. It's our largest mental health facility. So these are systemic issues. There's a lot of people in this country right now suffering from opioid addiction. Many of them aren't homeless. So what is the difference? We don't have enough resources to address their needs. We don't have enough housing. We don't have enough jobs that pay livable wages. We have too many people being evicted, and we have too much structural racism in this country. We know that people of color are overly represented in the population across the country, and overly represented in a dramatic way, like almost 5-to-1 in Los Angeles. So those symptoms are not what the issue is. I was on Skid Row a couple of weeks ago as well. And what I noticed is the enormous amount of women that were on the street. I did notice people with substance abuse issues, and we know that is about 40% of the population, either substance abuse or mental health. But that's not much bigger than the general population. And not everyone with a substance abuse issue ends up homeless. The people that end up homeless are the people that can't afford housing. And that's most of Los Angeles. Los Angeles has one of the highest housing costs in the country. They have one of the smallest vacancy rates in the countries. And those are the structural issues that have to be addressed. We do have to control substance abuse and mental health, but that people don't become homeless just because of those issues. They become homeless because they don't have housing.
I'm really glad you said that because I'm sure you've read about the leaked audio tapes from our city council members and the anti-Blackness sentiment that was expressed in those tapes. And one of the things that I had been hearing from some city council members before the tapes were leaked was that there was this anti-Blackness bias and this feeling that because 40 or more percent of the people on the streets of Los Angeles are Black, that there was this pitting of Black people on the streets who were labeled drug addicts against those that were labeled as hardworking immigrants by some of the Latino members of the council. And the sense that these Black people are on the streets because they have somehow chosen, right? They've made poor choices. They've made lifestyle choices that have landed them in this situation, and that we shouldn't be spending our enormous resources, our taxpayers' dollars, helping these people who have created their own suffering, that we should be spending it on people who come to this country and who are working hard to pull themselves up by the bootstraps. How pervasive is that sentiment that people on the streets, mostly these Black people, are there because they've made poor choices?
It's unfortunately, it's a growing sentiment. It's a sentiment that, if you look at the facts, is completely non-realistic and non-factual. There was a dramatic increase in the number of people of Latinx and Latino descent who were homeless in Los Angeles. So the numbers of Black and brown people are growing, and it isn't because of an inordinate amount of substance abuse. If you look at substance abuse, if you really look at the numbers, Black and people of color and white people use drugs at the same level. Unfortunately, more Black people are arrested for using drugs, and their penalties are longer, more Black and brown people. That's just the facts. So drug use is a symptom of every sector of our society. And again, in it itself does not cause homelessness. There are so many structural issues, and some are long lasting. Some started in California. We can look at redlining and the lack of wealth growth in this country that happened because people were denied one of the strongest vehicles for wealth growth, and that's home ownership. A lot of that happened in California. We can look at right now today, people are denied housing because of their race if they're using a Section 8 voucher or a permanent supportive housing or even a VAST voucher for our veterans. So we know that you can't deny someone outright, but you can deny the use of that voucher. Their source of payment for their housing can be a easy way to discriminate. And we know that's happening. We know that there's that racism exists in our job market. So we have to address these structural issues. Even if you go to places where the population of people of color is lower, is very low. And I think about some of the plain states, like, the Idahos of the world, the disproportionality still exists. And then if you look at poverty, if you look at white poverty, the number of people that are homeless, that arrow goes down. But if you look at poverty for people of color, the poverty's here and the number of homeless people are here. So it's not poverty. So we have to be honest.
That's an interesting statistic, Donald. So you're saying white people who live in poverty, their homelessness numbers go down versus people of color who live in poverty, their homeless numbers go up. What
by percentage? Yes.
Why the difference?
Well, the difference is structural racism. It is, we've looked at it across the country. There was a report called the Spark Report that looked at cities across the country. And we know from key informant interviews and focus groups, and also just looking at the statistics, that people of color are less likely to be able to get housing. Part of that is how we, it's a really
So
super
a black
complicated.
and a white person who are poor who go to apply for an apartment, the black person is likely, because of structural racism, may be denied that apartment, whereas the white person making the same amount of money may gain access to that apartment.
Absolutely. And we
That's gonna-
see that over and over again. Even the system itself, which we're working through, prioritizes the person who needs housing, even with the same kind of conditions. It's more likely with the system we use now that white person would be given the housing versus being referred as a black person. They're referred to more short-term solutions. But at the end of the day, the issue is this. We do not have enough housing. We have a 7 million housing gap in this country, meaning that 7 million people that are eligible for housing cannot get it because there's not enough housing for people, especially those at the low income portions of our society. It would actually, if you were using what the government says in their formula, what you should use out of your income to afford housing, it's about 30%.
Okay.
In Los Angeles,
like LA, obviously, that's a lot more.
it's $42 an hour. That's what you need to earn to be able to afford housing. However, we have strategies like permanent supportive housing. It would cost on a yearly basis probably about $40,000 to keep someone homeless. It only costs about $21,000 to put them in permanent supportive housing.
Well, let me
That's
ask you
a
this
housing
now.
unit. I'm sorry. go ahead.
I want to ask you this, a couple of things that I know, and I'm a part of Karen Bass's transition team and honored to be a part of it because I get to help drive some of these policies, and I get to talk to experts like you and take this information back to that team. A couple of things that I have observed that I want your input on. One, in talking to those police officers on Skid Row, they talked about trying to move people off the streets into temporary housing. We know that there's some issues for some people in terms of the location of that housing, some of the rules that come with living in shelters, not having your dog, not, being separated from perhaps your drug dealer. What percentage of people do you think are fall into that category, that no matter what you do, are not going to come off the streets? They've been on the streets too long. They maybe have paranoid schizophrenia or something that prevents them from coming off the street, even when offered housing. If we had to give a number for that, what would that be?
So I think that can be very confusing at times. So I've been doing this work almost 30 years. The number of people I've run into that would not take a housing unit is zero.
Okay.
I've never had somebody tell me they did not want housing. Now, people may not want to go into shelters, and that's another issue we need to work on. We need to do a better job of sheltering people.
Okay.
Shelters are absolutely not the solution to homelessness, but they are a solution to keep people protected from the elements and other people,
Right.
because there's a lot of violence that happens against homeless people. But if you offer a person housing, and that's what the housing first strategy is, instead of offering a person a bed in a shelter, we actually offer them a housing unit with supportive services. And that's the key. It's not just putting somebody in an apartment, it's also offering them supportive services to address mental illness and substance abuse and any kind of behavioral health issues. That strategy works 90% of the time. Okay. And so if we had enough housing to create the housing first strategy at its most effective measures, if we had enough to house everybody who needs it, that's about somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 to 40% of Los Angeles would actually fit into that category. They're what's called long-term or chronically homeless. That strategy works. We should be using that strategy. And if you offer that to somebody on the street, they're going to take it.
Okay, so that's great. So you cleared that up, that debunking that myth. Let me ask you a second question. So there's an article in the LA Times yesterday about the Cecil, it's a hotel that private developers had bought, had planned to develop it and have some part of it be affordable. The COVID hit, the economy, numbers went different for them in terms of this project. So now the whole hotel is affordable housing. It's a small apartment, small hotel room. Some have bathrooms, some don't. And the article was about the huge number of rooms that have not been filled. and the red tape and bureaucracy of getting someone off the street and getting into the Cecil hotel. Why are we still struggling in cities, particularly big cities like LA, with that process of moving people? You have available, I think they said at some point 40, 50% of the units were open. You
Right.
have the people, you have the housing. How do we shorten that time frame?
I think that's a question that we're examining every day. So I work with HUD on looking at streamlining that process. It is a cumbersome process right now. There's so many layers of bureaucracy that people have to go to. So we're looking at tools to shorten that bureaucracy. People have to prove their homelessness and prove their poverty to be able to get units. We believe one way to do that is make housing a human right, and make housing on demand. So if you qualify for the housing, we put you in the housing, and then we can figure out all the other issues later. So
That's
there's
one
a
of
lot
the suggestions, I guess the former administration was saying, let's do a master contract, but we'll just
Yes.
pay the Cecil, for X number of rooms, get the people in there, and then we'll deal with, like you said, getting the appropriate allocations for those individuals.
Exactly. And, there is other options that would speed that up. Cities all across this country have tons of abandoned units. You drive by them every day. You see all these buildings that are empty. If communities would use their own resources, Los Angeles, has put a lot of money into this issue, and we appreciate that. But I think this plan looks, I believe, to direct it because it's not just about the money; it's about putting money into the right places, addressing some of those structural issues like zoning laws that have held up development of housing units, looking at preventing eviction, giving people legal representation when evictions happen. Those are all things that we could do because here's what's happening. Every time we house a person in the system, 2 more people show up. So we have to stop the spigot. We have to stop people from entering into the system.
But how do we do that, Cecil? If you're saying you need to make $42 an hour, and California has one of the highest minimum wages in the country, $15, some even higher, nowhere near $42. So,
right.
I mean, that means that you've got to have almost 3 people living in that house, making $15 to add up to that $42 an hour. And that's, somebody may have a mother and a father and a child that can do that. Some people are single. It's just one of me. I only make that $15 an hour. So how do we stem the tide of people falling, as you said, into homelessness as we're helping to house those that are already on the streets?
So those numbers are correct. If you look at the National Low-Income Housing's Out of Reach report, it really identifies those numbers. However, if we create subsidized housing, people aren't paying at that level. They're paying 30% of their income.
Okay.
So in that case, people could make a lower amount and still be able to afford housing. We only have enough subsidized housing through the Housing Choice Voucher Program for about a quarter of the people that need it. So again, it comes back to supply.
Yeah, that's my other question, Donald. We get them off the street. We get them into, we know there are these many houses that are going up all over Los Angeles as a part of this solution. You said using vacant city properties. We know these small units, some of which can go in people's backyards, some are going on empty lots, church properties, et cetera. I've been on drugs or I have mental health issues. I'm not really capable of working. How do I sustain the rent? Because you just said 25%, there are only 25% of these vouchers available. So how do I keep my rent paid so I don't end up homeless again?
I'm glad you said that. I don't think that there is an impossibility that if you have mental health or substance abuse issues that you won't be able to work. So the first thing we have to do—
people with mental health can't work, but there are some people who are going to not be able to work. Some people are disabled. I mean, they may be able to get disability from the federal government. but I don't even know if that would be enough to sustain their housing.
No, even, they do use more than 30% even on a subsidy when they get Social Security or SSI or SSDI. But here's the issue. The percentage of those people is smaller. And it is my belief that our society should be taking care of people that don't have the ability to work for themselves. So permanent supportive housing, whether they have an income or not, it would still be 30% of that. So it would be 30% of zero in this case. So their housing would be fully subsidized. Some people have minimum rents in some communities, but their housing would be subsidized. So that's how we take care of those. But we also offer the ability for people to move on from their subsidized housing. There's a program that helps people move to home ownership within the Housing Choice Voucher Program. Also, if we create more livable wage jobs in this country, if we look at making sure that people have training for the 21st century jobs, there are some dollars within the infrastructure bill that would help people get into some of the technology industries that are emerging. So some of the emerging markets and emerging market jobs would be targeted to people that are homeless. So I can say that for sure because that's my story. I became homeless because of substance abuse issues. But I actually have 3 jobs right now. So the possibility of people moving on and changing their lives happens every day. We don't see those stories as much, but they're out there.
Well, no, actually, the guy that does the cooking for the Thanksgiving feed at LA Mission, he was formerly unhoused too because of a substance abuse problem. And he came off the streets. He went into the mission. He got trained as a chef. And now he cooks the entire meal for like 1,500 to 2,500 people every year for the mission's Thanksgiving feed. And he does it again for Christmas. And he works at the mission and he cooks there. So there are stories like yours and like this cook at the chef, I should call him, at the mission. Very encouraging. Glad to see you in LA, Donald. Thank you so much for your expertise. I hope that means you're going to be in LA a lot more. I hope the Bass team relies on you, calls on you, because we need all hands on deck. I am so proud that, as you said, Mayor Bass didn't just talk about taking action. She took some real definitive action on her first day on the job. And she said, look, this is hard. This is hard work. She asked us all at that inauguration speech, she told us, look, I can't do this alone. Every neighborhood in this city has to be willing to step up and do its part. And so we are just, looking for some positive things to happen, given her passion on this issue and given the team that she's putting together. And hope to see you as some part of that team, whether you're consulting, you're just visiting the city, but offering your expertise. But again, thanks so much, Donna, for always sharing your story and for coming on this morning.
And thank you, Areva. And I would just say, we have opened the field office in Los Angeles, so we're 100% committed to being a part of the solution.
Fantastic. Well, I may run into you on Skid Row or any time that you're out visiting in Los Angeles. But again, thanks for your expertise on this.
Thank you.
All right. I have Richard Green coming up next. You guys know Richard. He's our political strategist, and we're going to talk a little politics at the end of the show. Richard, good morning.
Hi, and I'm so glad you are part of that Karen Bass team.
Yeah, I'm super honored to be a part of the transition team. She's about 100 folks, all with different expertise, lawyers and developers and educators, folks who bring, a variety of different experiences, some Congress people, some former governors, and folks who are going to just put our heads down, unpaid, just people who care about the city and who are going to try to offer some real life solutions to help her help stand up this new team. She's got to build a team and build it quickly because that transition from winning and going to work, some of the state officers won't go to work until January, but she literally went to work on Monday. So she had like a 2.5 week transition.
And after her 2 terms, I look forward to calling you Mayor Martin.
Well, I don't know about that, but I'm not going to rub it in that you said she wasn't going to win, because you have seen those numbers where she's won not just by that 3 to 7% that we thought, but well in the 10% range. So some would say it wasn't even close, Richard.
No, I listen, you know, I'm not right all the time. I was basing it upon an informal sample group of my own friends who were progressives. And that was shocking to me. And it's like, holy mackerel, there's a hidden, you know, Rick Caruso vote in there. And maybe that still happened, but a lot of people who love Karen Bass or wanted to see a woman of color be our first mayor came out to vote.
Yeah, it's people power.
I'm happy about it. Can we drop this moving forward?
I know we will. We'll move on. But you know that $109 million, it couldn't buy love, and it couldn't buy enough votes to win the mayoral election. But I want to talk a little politics with you. Big challenges ahead for our new mayor. Declared a state of emergency to address homelessness. You know, I have not seen anyone, including former administrations, demonstrate the passion, the resolve, the determination that she has on this subject. Now, obviously, she's got to get down to brass tacks, and you know, it's not an easy task. But what do you think politically happens given the changes in our city council, given the defiance of Kevin De Leon, who showed up at the council meeting yesterday, refused to leave, voted for the emergency measure that the city council had to approve, because even though she declared it, it had to be approved by the city council. What do you make of the politics that she's facing, given you know the transition and the turmoil still in city council?
So we could talk about this for a long time. First of all, her declaring a state of emergency on homelessness was the perfect thing to do. Not just for Los Angeles, but it helped brand our party across the country.
Yes.
And I love Eric Garcetti. I've known him a long time. I think his approach to homelessness, maybe it was fantastic behind the scenes, but on the outside, it looked like a failure. So that was awesome. And I think let's just focus on that. With respect to Kevin De Leon, as far as I know, the city of Los Angeles does not have, or the city council does not have the ability to kick him out. The only people who can fire a legislator that they hired is Kevin's own constituents. So maybe there's a recall possibility, but I think more likely than not, Areva, he's going to be there. He seems to be, you know, very, very focused on staying in office, but he's going to vote the right way. So, you know, we may have to move on from that. And when election time comes, you know, make sure that he's not reelected, if that's what people want.
I mean, I've talked to a bunch of folks on the city council. There seems to be two schools of thought. One is, do not let this one man bully, you know, the rest of the council, and that the council should be defiant itself and not meet to force him out. And others say, no, we've got to move on with the business of the city, and we've got to, like, you know, hold our nose and move on. And as you said, let the people in his district either recall him or, you know, oust him when he's up for re-election. So it'll be interesting to see which of these, you know, becomes the strategy that is pursued.
But again, we talk about the importance of voting and elections all the time. And by the way, you know, there are a lot of people who still didn't vote in the midterms with all of these issues locally and nationally. That's why elections are important. We were stuck with Donald Trump for 4 years. Like, oh my God, I didn't realize he was that bad. Well, you should have gotten that figured out before, you know, November of 2016. So I think ultimately let's suck it up. Let's move on. He's going to be a reliable vote for basically good things. And then, you know, deal with that during the election. I am more concerned about our party nationally. And I know you did want to talk about a particular person.
Yeah, let's talk about Kristen Sinema. She, you know, after the Dems have this banner midterm elections, historic, didn't lose the 25 to 55 seats. We only lost 10. Picked up a senator, picked up some governors' mansions, picked up some state legislatures. She comes out and says, I'm done with you Democrats. I'm going to be an independent, but don't take me off my committees. Don't, remove me from leadership. Now, we know there's a historic precedent for what she's doing, but what do you make of it?
I think she's politically a genius.
Okay,
And
why?
I think she has some serious issues. I'm just going to leave it at that. And everyone I talk to who congressmen, senators agrees with me. But again, elections, she has a 6-year
But why
term.
is it smart on her part? What do you think she's angling
No,
for? She's going to get
it's
primaried in 2 years.
It's genius. She cannot win a Democratic primary in the state of Arizona. And I think what she's going to do, by the way, I have some inside information from a friend of mine who's very plugged in DC, and he told me that this group, No Labels, who is this kind of moderate, can't we all work together kind of vestige from the past. Mike Bloomberg used to be involved in that. Used to be a good thing. But now the Republicans have gone so far off the reservation, none of that stuff's possible. It's a waste of time. But they love their Kirsten Sinema. And apparently they are going to back her for a run for president.
In 24?
In 24.
As an independent?
Yeah. As a No Labels. I'm a centrist. I'm a John McCain independent.
We're going to crush her in that. And let me give you my prediction. We're going to crush her in that race. And we're going to crush her when she runs as an independent in Arizona as an independent. So you call it genius. I call it, saving face because she can't win as a Democrat. Because, there's a congressman in Arizona that's
Ruben
polling.
Gallego.
Ruben
Gallego will be the Democratic nominee in Arizona. I'll bet anything on that now.
Yeah. So she knows those numbers. She's seen those polls. So she knows she can't be the candidate for the Dems in Arizona.
People in Arizona, Democrats in Arizona, will crawl on glass to vote against her in a Democratic primary, right? So she can't win that. But here's the thing. What if there's polling 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, 2 months before the actual election in Arizona that shows that Gallego and Sinema are splitting the Democratic vote so severely that it's a guarantee that the Republican wins? Then Sinema says, I'm not pulling out. You, Ruben, need to pull out because we need my vote in the United States Senate. Otherwise, we don't have the majority. I mean, she is Machiavellian. She's the Mitch McConnell with longer hair.
But Mitch is sitting somewhere sucking his thumb. I cannot see the numbers being close like that. I think she has created such animus amongst the Democrats that, as you said, people are going to walk across glass to vote against her. So for now, the good news is she's there. She's going to caucus with Dems, we guess. Kamala Harris will not have to be, tied to the, Senate. And I read an article this morning. They talked about how this has been so crippling for her. She's had to break the tie 26 times. Now, it's not the nation's history. I think Vice President, years ago, there was like 30 or 31 times, but it does prevent her from traveling. It prevents her from, having an agenda that's away from Washington. So now her team is feeling more empowered that she's going to be able to get away.
That is a great point because she's got so much criticism. What's Kamala doing? What she's doing is staying close to DC so she can be the deciding vote.
This article said a whole part of her team does nothing but stay in contact with Schumer because that's how Biden's brilliant cross the aisles legislation is getting done. Because she's doing that, she's breaking the tie because the vice president is also the president of the Senate. People forget that. So she needs a lot of credit for that. As you said, people are criticizing her. Where is she? Where is she? She's doing the business of the couple of questions before I let you go, Richard. Any fear that Sinema might start caucusing with the Republicans? Any fear about that?
I've been afraid of it every single day. But that's the answer to your question. Why is she still going to keep her committee assignments? Because she has to. We literally have to treat her like she is an atomic bomb about to blow up at any time, and just wait this out for the next 2 years. And let's hope that she doesn't.
So many
up
divas.
Arizona.
Joe Manchin last year, now Sinema the diva. Oh my God, these people need to get over themselves.
Can I say last thing about Joe Manchin? On my social media, people are constantly blasting Joe Manchin. Oh, I hope he loses, blah, blah. No, Joe Manchin has been critical. We don't have Ketanji Brown Jackson without Joe Manchin. We don't have hundreds of other judges. We don't have all sorts of great things that we elected Joe Biden for, except for Joe Manchin. He is the very best Democrat and possibly the only Democrat we're going to get out of a state that voted for Donald Trump by almost 40 points. So get over it. This is politics.
You're right. Remind ourselves that, he's the best of the worst. Okay, I'm going to give you that. Last point. You remember when a Republican strategist called Joe Biden slow and steady, and that was a pejorative term. That was a diss. It was
I saw that
insult.
article.
You saw the article. Now, slow and steady Joe. I don't know. We need to take the slow off, right? We need to call him speedy and steady, because this dude, where's this marriage equality? Where'd that come from? That wasn't even on the radar. And he gets 12 Republican senators to sign that bill, like 39 in the House.
So I'm
what happened to Sleepy Joe?
He's killing it. Areva, this old guy is killing it, right? But by the way, with the moment of the day, well, there were several. First of all, to understand that there were only 12 of 50 Republican senators who voted for that. So that means the vast majority of your Republican senators across the country don't want gay people to be able to have a right to marry or to get contraception. I mean, we need for people to understand that. But I thought the sweetest thing of the whole ceremony was when Joe gives the pen to Kamala. And she looks like a little girl who had just caught a baseball, or given a baseball by a, the center fielder.
For me, that moment was like, no.
She deserves it.
She was such a champion on this issue in California. So it was
so is Joe Biden, who stood up to his own president and said, Mr. President, this is the right thing. No, Joe is going to go down in history as this unbelievably successful guy.
So anyway. You know what the lesson I think for all of us is? Don't underestimate the quiet guy. It just keeps his head down. Not all the flash, not all the, the bombastic, words and phrases, not the big rallies, just the quiet, hardworking guy that likes to go to Delaware on the weekend, doesn't want to do all those state parties. They have to force him to do a state dinner. He doesn't want to have a bunch of people in the White House. He just want to go home and be a grandfather. The dude is doing everything he said he would do without all the fanfare.
Can I make one other point? It's not just his demeanor. Let us not, please, be ageist in our politics in this country. Yes. Nancy Pelosi's in her 80s. Nobody could have gotten accomplished what Nancy Pelosi has gotten accomplished the last 2 years. Why? Because she has maturity and wisdom and experience that only can come from being in politics for almost all of her 80 years. And the same thing for Joe Biden.
I want to just stop for a moment and amen that, because not only did she get all of that accomplished, she then left a bench. First Black man, Latino from California, white woman, like
it's perfect.
The dream team of dream teams, right? Represent the country. Amazing bench of younger legislators, and not many people. Again, that's putting that ego aside. That's not saying I'm going to stay here till you roll me out on a stretcher because I don't want to share power. That's what I just, that was to me, that was the biggest gangster boss move ever.
Oh, she's incredible. But the best thing I will always remember her for is that he wants to come down to the Capitol, let him come down. I'm going to punch him in the face. And then she looks at the camera and says, I'm going to go to jail, but it'll be worth it. I mean, she is gangster. She is. And by the way, Hakeem Jeffries, this guy is special.
Yeah.
Everybody, if you don't know Hakeem Jeffries, we're in for a treat. This guy is special.
Well, I think the whole team, I just love the whole team. I love the representation. She didn't forget about any, stakeholder.
I agree.
Okay, Rich, got to have you back. So much to talk about. Thank you so much.
Always.
Great times for the Democrats. We're going into the holidays. It's not perfect. And people are like, griping. I'll tell you this. Do you know people were griping at Karen's inauguration because we had to stand outside and wait? And I'm telling people, it's not Karen, it's the vice president. She's in town. The venue was outside. They changed it. She had 4 days. I'm surprised Secret Service didn't pull her. They usually need 2 weeks to come into town, do their job, protect the vice president. Who has the vice president at their inauguration? When you're the mayor of a city, nobody, nada, zero. That's not the job of the vice president to come into a city to swear someone in and then to go quietly sit in her seat, not make a speech, not make it about her. And I'm like, people, you're complaining because the first Black vice president female is going to swear in the first Black female mayor of Los Angeles, and you're here to witness that. It's sunny outside, you're not in the rain, and you got to complain.
I think we in Los Angeles just can't handle the cold. It just sets us off.
We can't handle anything. We're all snow. I spent the morning like yelling at people because I just been to the vice president's house for a holiday party. And you can't go around these people without going through this process. We want them to stay alive. We don't want them killed by something crazy. And if I have to be inconvenienced, stand outside in Washington for 30 minutes, stand outside in the sunshine in Los Angeles for 30 minutes, what a small price to pay to be a part of history. All right, Richard, happy holidays. I'll see you soon.
Take care, Areva. Good to see you again.
Thank Donald for moving that office into Los Angeles. That's so special. We need his expertise on this homeless issue. Always a pleasure to see Richard. I am so excited about Karen Bass. She is going to be a phenomenal mayor. She's already doing something the prior administrations did not do, and that is expressing how serious this issue of homelessness is. And it doesn't mean she's going to do everything right. We have to give her grace. We have to be patient. But we have to acknowledge that she took a big, bold step to say that this matters. And she wants the entire city, and as Richard said, the entire nation to know that Democrats care about poor people. They care about unhoused people. They care about people who are underserved. And the way you show that is through policy. And that's what Karen Bass has set out to do. So I'm incredibly proud of her, proud to be a part of her transition team. And we're going to watch this space because I think some good things are going to happen. And she said she's going to restore the magic in Los Angeles. And I believe her. Be safe out there. And remember, we're all in this together.